A warm welcome, everybody. Yeah, you can all crowd in a little bit here. The presenters here. We've got both screens, but yeah, I'm glad everyone's here. We'll come forward a little bit. Or they've got extra screens for everybody.
It's a good idea.
Yeah. Get a bit closer. I think everyone in the room, everyone online should hear us. We've got microphones on our fancy new setup. The first time back in these rooms. And so a warm welcome, everyone online and also everyone in the room. My name is Adam Hems, and I'm the leader of the Houston Azure User Group. Welcome to the December edition. I've got some new faces. Bill is brand new to Houston and has been greeting everybody. So I appreciate Bill being here. And Dan is new too, also a newbie, some familiar. Yeah, Fahad's new as well. Welcome. Some new faces and some familiar folks. Kim is here. Excellent. She is helping out. Welcome. Kim is a colleague who's you going to guard the door for me, Kim?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Yes, thank you. Yes, sure. Kim is a cloud consultant, a colleague of mine at Microsoft, so she's helping me out. Thank you, Kim.
Sure.
Is your son here today as well?
Yes.
Oh, he's doing the doors. Excellent. Wonderful. It's a family affair, once again. Those of you who have been here a few times might recognize Kim as a speaker as well. She has spoken here at the user group. You know, keep it a group of family affair here in town. Anyway, for those of you who are newer to our group, a little bit about what we're about. We've been running this group since about 2016. Took it over from a person who moved to Florida, and he was like, yeah, I asked him, hey, we have any meetups? He said, yeah, I moved to Florida. Do you want to take it over? I said, yeah, sure. I'm game. We had like about less than 200 members. And I think they'd all forgotten they were members at the time. So, I mean, it was dead, basically. So took it over and started having discussions around Azure and learnings, right? With the intent that we learn from one another, because for any of you who have been working with cloud or looking to work with this whole cloud technology, it's a journey for everybody, for individuals, for companies, large and small, for people working with it, from a beginning of usually on-prem, right, to lots and lots of cloud, varying kinds of infrastructure. And getting there, depending on large and small customers, it's a journey for everyone. It's similar because the technology is the same, even though the business problems you're looking to solve are different. And I get to do that all day. My day job at Microsoft is as a cloud architect. I've been doing this, I'm at Microsoft for 15 years, and this role for the last 7. So I really like cloud, as you can tell. Not bored yet, but it's still fun. And honestly, that's because it changes so much, so often. I mean, I was at the launch of Azure in 2010, and it was like, that's a bit, that's not that great. It was like, okay, well, start. It was a start. It was a beginning. It was something, right? It was something. And there's early years where, it was early days. Didn't even get virtual machines until 2011. No VMs at all. So there was that much, frankly, that could be done with it in the early days. But it grew. It changed a lot. Got to see all that, and it's grown. It's just colossal. It's colossal now, as we know now. 12 years later, truly just a behemoth. Struggling to keep up. In fact, it's too much to keep up with. So now we have to specialize. Back when I started, you could just learn the whole thing. It wasn't that hard. Now I have to specialize in bits of it. And now even certain little, one individual products are now getting so complicated that it's possible to specialize just in those. So seen a lot of change. And that's part of the reason why I think groups like this is important, because keeping up with that change, learning from others is what we're here about, because that's what's necessary. Can't be behind. Who do you learn from? Learn from others who have been on the journey, others who are in different industries as well, and that's part of the intent of this group. Meet and greet, learn from others, and also learn from members of the community. Now, in terms of the presentation tonight, and we've had various printers, including Kim. A number of my colleagues have stepped up to volunteer their free time, frankly, because this is not their day job or mine. This is not a Microsoft event, right? This is a community event, very specific. Microsoft let us use the room. That's real nice. And I have colleagues who volunteer their time to help out. But yeah, not a Microsoft event. So if you're looking for a sales pitch or anything like that, in the wrong place. That's not what we're about. This is just about learning from one another. And that's my passion. That's the intent of this group. And so we've had the opportunity to learn from many of my colleagues. Some of my favorite presentations of where we've had the chance to learn from members of the groups here. And it's been fun. We've had a lot of presentations from people who have presented and got better jobs as a result. Some folks who have presented and then joined Microsoft in various roles and then presented again when in Microsoft role. So it's been fun seeing people learn and grow, listening and learning from folks as part of their journey and their experience. Helping people find better jobs at Microsoft and at other companies. That's part of it. It's been great, and it continues to be so. So one of my favorite things about tonight is we've also got a long-time member of the community speaking. Nitin, you've been coming long time.
Long time.
Yeah.
But this is first time speaking.
First time speaking, but he's a long time member. So Nitin and his company are sponsoring the food tonight as well. So that's also something else. So thank you for the food. Take that. And also Nitin is speaking. So I mean, without further ado, I'm going to shut up and Nitin, work with yourself and
Event code.
event code for Ray. Yes, I'll write it up.
Nothing here?
Yes, I'll put it here. Go for it, Nitin.
All right. Good evening, everybody. First of all, thank you for coming down. And like as Adam said, I've been attending sparsely off and on, but this is the first time presenting anywhere. So I'm glad. Thank you for the opportunity. And one of the key things motivating me was like as Adam was saying, that cloud is changing so fast and so, I mean, like in the last few years, 10+ years. I just want to share something which I learned in the last 6 months, something which is exciting, something which I felt that, okay, this is something interesting that I need to share with the community because I also received the same thing from the community. And so without further ado, like as Adam said, this is not about sales pitch of any nature. So I'll have just a couple of slides over there, but again, this is for the community. There we go. So today, one of my favorite topics we're going to talk about is Azure Automation. Like as you must have seen, Azure has grown tremendously in the last 10 years. And nowadays, one thing what we are seeing is a need for how we can automate and how we can actually make things easier. Just like in words of my ex-boss, long time back, make work go away. So basically, we have to find out interesting ways to automate and get a handle on all these resources. And this has opened up new opportunities for us. And there are new things we learn every day. And something which I learned in the last 6+ months and which I'm going to share with the team today. So the agenda, very quick overview of the firm. And then we're going to talk about the Azure Automation. Then we dive into a demo. I have a couple of demos over here. And then Q&A. All right, this is a very quick plug-in about the company. So this is Bluebery, Hawaii. I started out the company in Hawaii, and that's the garage you're actually seeing. That's where we started, named after my favorite dessert. And we are in business for continuous business for more than 6+ years now. This is a second shot at it. First shot was in Hawaii. This is the last slide for this one. We go without automation. So this is what we are based in Hawaii. We are based in Hawaii, and now we are based out of Houston. And we are trying now we have done a lot of work for federal agencies. Today we have done work for not only the Azure public cloud, but also Azure government cloud. Also the variety of flavors in M365, including GCC and GCC Hybrid. So we bring experience of all those areas and work for really large clients as well. Now, that's the last one. So coming back to the point of Azure Automation. So how many of you have actually leveraged Azure Automation as a part of your daily job, or have you heard about it? Right, would you like to share?
I've used it for update management.
Used it for run batch jobs, some light trigger functions. Haven't gone too deep in it.
Excellent. What about you?
I've heard of it.
What about you?
Just heard of it.
All right.
I'll say, I have done some slot swapping automation and worked very well with the PowerShell script.
Cool. So as you can see, Azure Automation, you can do a variety of things, ranging from operating system updates to configuration service. So in overall, as per from the Microsoft documentation, you can see it does process automation, configuration management, update management, and shared capabilities. So it's a wide area that it covers. So this is one nice picture I found on Google about Azure Automation. As you can see, it does a lot of things, not only from automating from the aspect of Azure resources to hybrid runbook worker. That's my favorite area nowadays. This is where I have worked in the last 6 months. And also integrating with external resources, external services, as well as trying to have DSC configuration in the deployment. So it can do a lot over here. And now the only question is, how do you plan it? How do you execute it? And how do you manage it? That's the key. So now this particular slide, as you can see, works into 3 different areas, like how you can use Azure Automation. The first part is deploy and manage with the bicep, blueprints, automation, automate. This is where we are talking about infrastructure as a code. So that, because how many of you have tried to create Azure resources using the UI or PowerShell, it's pretty hard. So one of the things that we try to do from the best practices point of view is how you are going to provision the resources in a standard way. So Microsoft Azure provides variety of approaches such as blueprint, biceps, and then we can leverage Azure Automation to actually provision the Azure resources. My favorite one is Terraform. I work with all those services, but actually this is one area, Azure Automation Assist. Second one is responding, if something happens, what you do there, you're leveraging, connecting with the Azure functions, policies, on making the changes based on the reaction to certain events. This is another aspect of Azure Automation. And the last one example is orchestration, which is leveraging logic apps, functions, automation to do that. So today, the demos that I have is actually in the area of orchestration. So leveraging Azure hybrid connection and hybrid worker. So now, one interesting story. I'll talk about that story when we go to the next slide. So first is process automation. So where you are actually using Azure Runbook, and for example, you can actually run PowerShell or Python through Azure instead of running on a machine. And basically, also you can have webhooks. Now, one example of webhook that I have implemented a couple of years back, it was nowadays there's one more trend apart from provisioning resources in Azure is user-driven provisioning. So taking the IT department out of the picture and having the users select the sizes of the resources they want. So basically, in that case, I had to actually develop a .NET-based web-based interface in which user just selects the t-shirt sizes of the resources. And in the backend, we used to have the code which generates the ARM templates for Windows or Linux machines on fly. And then we have a webhook that would call the PowerShell script in the Azure Automation that will actually provision the resources. So you are taking the IT out of the picture. You don't have to request IT to actually provision the resources for you. You can have it automated way to do that. And while you're doing it, You're also actually like providing all the best practices as per the naming convention and how you're gonna provision the resource and where, region and everything. So it makes, I mean, like this is just one example of leveraging Azure Runbooks and Webhook, actually. This is one good example of Webhook. Any questions so far?
About Ansible.
Good.
Ansible?
Ansible, I'll be honest, I haven't worked much with Ansible. So I know it's for configuration of the VMs or machines, you can do the configuration, but honestly, I've worked with more with Terraform compared to Ansible. So be able to say much about it.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked with Ansible, right? So you can stand up Ansible and run it in a virtual machine. You can give it the scripts in order to make it do stuff, including infrastructure as code, and that works perfectly. That's fine. So if you know Ansible, or if you have a whole bunch of scripts that use it, great choice, not a problem. Azure Automation does many of the same things. The difference, of course, is there's no VMs needed, right? And you don't have to, it's less of a learning curve. So it doesn't like compete with Ansible necessarily. It's sort of the Azure native alternative. If you've got Ansible, you know it, then great. Or other tools that are similar to that. It's, that's fine, but that's some extra complexity.
Yeah.
If that answers your question, it's a platform as a service automation engine like Ansible, including the creation of scripts, things like that. We'll do that. Yeah.
In our team, we are trying to automate a lot of things, but
Yeah, automate all the things that's the key to success right there, right? You no manual anything, automate all the things. Yes.
What's the best?
It's a choice because I think both of them are a little bit different products. Like if you're going for more configuration wise, I think Ansible would be the choice. This is my perception. And Terraform is more for resource provisioning and everything there. For configuration wise, you may have to leverage Packer. Yeah. For Ansible, I remember I had a project where I think you had to have a machine running and I was trying to integrate Ansible with DevOps in that case, and you had to execute the script on that machine and Linux VM, make it possible just to provision the resources. So that's one bare example I remember for Ansible.
Chef is another alternative, right? Chef is more often used to configure machines. Again, it's not a bad choice. If you've got an investment in that, then great. Stand up virtual machines, run and operate that. Perfectly good solution. If you already have in-house expertise and invested time in learning in that thing. Same with Ansible. If that's what you know, got a lot of investment in it, then great. Continue that investment. But if you're, you don't have any knowledge of Ansible at all, you don't have any background in it, then this is a smaller learning curve.
It all depends on like which tool you are trying to use. So one size doesn't fit all. And also like skill set in the tool is also important. Because you can pick up a tool and then if you don't have the right people with the right skill set, then it becomes harder. So going back to the configuration management, you can also change the tracking and inventory as well as the automation state configuration. Well, yeah, I haven't done much over here with automation in this area. For examples, update management, this is also you can do through the scheduled deployments to deployments of the updates in the well-defined maintenance windows on the machines. So basically, there are the various ways you can actually leverage automation, also shared capabilities. So you can actually like share the resources. Also, you can have a RBAC using Azure resource-based access control. You can control the resources in Azure Automation as well. I remember like in my Webhook project, for the provisioning, automated provisioning of Azure resources, I was able to leverage service principles and have its keys in a key vault and then try to access from there. So it was a fun project, but you can actually make it happen so that it's completely distinct from the end user. So that whoever is actually requesting the resource do not need to have any permissions in Azure. In cut. And of course, like you can, if you have products such as SailPoint, I think you can also automate it, and also you can integrate with ServiceNow. Really don't have to go that far. So some of the scenarios, these are limited scenarios listed over here, such as scheduled tasks you can have. So basically, like one example is if you are able to create a PowerShell script, run it as a scheduled job on a machine, a physical machine or a virtual machine on-prem, you can also do that in cloud. And you can have a scheduled job over there, or you can actually like also Logic app to have scheduled job. So basically you can do that. Now with this scheduled job, you can do a lot of things, such as some of the things which I've done in past is like grab a list of all the VMs which are up, or identify all the VMs which are up, shut it down on Friday evening and bring them up on Monday morning. And so you can do all kinds of things, or make a report of what process has been running for so long, and also like if any VMs are new VMs, new resources are created over last 1 week or something, so you can have reporting going on. So you can do a lot of things. Lifecycle management as well. Build and deploy Azure resources. We talked about provisioning, monitoring, and integrating. So once you have this mechanism in Azure, you are able to like do a lot of things. You just have to be innovative and see what you actually are looking for to do. And of course, responding to the alerts. So based on something happens, you can have Logic apps with the HTTP handlers, just listening for it, and something happens, they take action on it. We'll see as part of our demo today, and also hybrid automation, where what you can do is that you can integrate your on-prem resources and with your cloud, and you are able to drive it, even though these resources are on-prem. And you are able to make changes, you are able to automate it, and you are able to integrate. Today, our demos are oriented around hybrid automation, but it has components of other areas. Any questions so far? First, Azure Hybrid Worker, there are two types, extension-based as well as agent-based. For agent-based, you need you work with after the log analytics agent is completed. So basically, when a system or when a user-based. Now, I'll be showing two types of hybrid workers today. One is hybrid connection, hybrid integration today. One is hybrid connection, and one is hybrid worker. And one thing which I learned in the last 6 months is if you're trying to do something with Azure, with Active Directory on-prem, then this actually, like, it does not actually support LDAP. So if you have to work with a domain joint Active Directory, you have to actually use a hybrid worker rather than hybrid connection. I have a demo for both so that you can see how both of them look, how both of them work. That's something I wanted to pull out. This is something which I learned in the last 6 months, which is interesting. Now, hybrid worker, as you can see, best part, you are able to you have to configure and install this worker on the machine that you are trying to integrate. In my case of the demo, it's actually Azure VM acting as a domain joint directory. And what we are trying to do is that we are trying to, as a part of the demo, create a Active Directory group on a on-prem AD.
Hey, Nitin, could you speak up? We can't all hear you in the back. Yeah, just speak up a little bit.
Sure. So what we'll be
Where's the
doing
mic?
is,
If you want? Do you want to use a mic? Do you want to handle the mic?
that'd be great. But that was loud. Right?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Is there a difference between a runbook and a hybrid runbook?
Runbook is actually like running, it's hosted in Azure as part of the Azure Automation account. Hybrid Worker is actually running on the
Think. Yeah, I think it's on.
Hello.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
that's it.
so basically the hybrid worker is actually running on the machine, on the on-prem server. Basically, what happens that as a part of the process, the runbook actually gets downloaded and actually is executed on-prem. So this is why they see that if you have certain modules to be implemented or executed, you have to get it installed on-prem. So in my case, I'm having the modules, I'm importing the modules in the runbook itself. So every time it runs, it installs it and it works with it. This particular diagram, I like the diagram because it shows you a variety of ways that hybrid work actually helps you out. So essentially what you're doing is you are actually runbooks that you have in your automation account on the physical or virtual device, virtual machines which are executing, but everything is being orchestrated in cloud.
And Nitin, I think I want to call out one of the features that I think is a particular value here shown on this diagram that is not obvious. So that's actually this connection right here, this TCP connection, 443, this one right here, is particularly important to a lot of enterprise customers because this, well, it's a TLS encryption, obviously, it's a secure encryption. But what this does not require, which a lot of enterprises are concerned about, or is a blocker for a lot of companies, is connectivity directly to on-prem. So ordinarily, you've got Azure and your on-prem. You may need site-to-site VPN, right? Or an express route, a lot of expense, a lot of cost, a lot of networking, a lot of security concerns. It's a big deal to stand up that thing and get all that connectivity going. If you're a random business unit, you don't want to have to deal with IT, or there's just a lot of issues and things like that. It's just a huge blocker to leverage that connectivity or get it stood up in the first place. Maybe it's not in a region that you actually need, for example. It's kind of a big deal and kind of a big blocker. None of that is required by Azure Hybrid Worker, because the way it works is it simply talks outbound from on-premises to Azure via an HTTPS connection using the public internet. So as long as whatever you've got on-prem here can see out to the internet, which is not necessarily a given, but can be arranged usually without too much of a problem, then it can be orchestrated from Azure using this service. And that's actually quite a big deal. It's technically relatively simple. Connections outbound to the internet of HTTPS, yay. But then automating it on-prem as a result from Azure, because the connection's initiated on-prem, but then Azure can then tell it what to do. And that's quite a powerful capability. Anyway, want to call that out.
Thank you, Adam. In fact, that's true. Yes.
I have a question. I was in software development for many, many years. And we moved our development and DevOps to Azure. But the people still worked on their local machines. They brought down the source, made whatever changes, ran the local tests and stuff, and then put the changes up. Is that hybrid or not? Because they are working on their local machines. But
Not exactly hybrid in the sense, because you are still like downloading a copy through the Git repositories, and then there is a responsibility of the developers to push it back, right? But here, in the sense, we are saying this is hybrid in that you are able to make changes on an on-prem machine from cloud. You're running the whole orchestration from the cloud, and you're able to make changes like creating an AD group. I'm just giving them an example. Creating an AD group, adding a user to it, and including assigning permissions. So basically, and not just on one machine, but you can have for hundreds of machines. So this is the power that your hybrid automation is.
So our IT people assigning permissions for people to get the source and check things in, they might be hybrid.
I'll jump in here. So I would say that what we typically describe as hybrid is servers running on-prem.
Okay.
What you described, Ray, was client desktop. So like the one in front of you, laptop, something like that. That's a client machine. That is not hybrid. That's a desktop machine, cloud connected. Maybe if it's got a VPN client in it that talks to something on premises, right? Then that thing that it talks to on premises, like a domain controller, or maybe you've got build servers or something like that on-prem, those components are hybrid. And those are the components, those servers on-prem are what could be automated via, for example, Azure Hybrid Worker, not the developer's workstation. So you may have build machines, for example, on premises.
We had build machines on premises, but we actually moved them
Up to Azure.
up to Azure.
Yeah, that's usually what happens. When you've moved those to Azure, then that's not hybrid anymore. That's cloud only. But yes, when those build machines, those servers were on premises, that was hybrid.
Essentially, one way I describe them as workhorse solutions. So basically, when it's a workhorse, it keeps working in the background. You don't worry about it. It always works. And this is what we are trying to build using the Azure Hybrid Workers over here. So that it's an automation, runs in the background, and you won't get alerted if something goes wrong, but it's a workhorse solution. You don't need to worry about it. But in case of your Azure DevOps, people have to interact. They have to submit the code. Otherwise, like, you won't have the most updated code in the repository. So it's definition wise, this is, we are calling it hybrid. Yeah.
That's your question, Ray?
It does. Yeah.
I think Bill had a
I had
question.
a question.
Yes.
How does the worker VM authenticate?
That's a good one. Worker VM authenticate. So there are two ways. One is you pass the credentials in the, of course, the easy way to test it out, pass the credentials in the runbook. That's one. Second is it does provide a way to do run as. So, but you do it on the hybrid worker groups. So, so you have the run as capability so that you are able to run as some other account, so that you have that suppression. Whoever is executing it, they have the right permissions. For example, like for one of the clients that I worked for, they never gave me the password for the service account that was going to make changes, because it was the Active Directory admin account, enterprise admin account. They won't give you the password for that. So he created a run as account and a credential, and then I was doing a run as that particular account. So that's one way to run it.
You should always be run as anywhere.
True.
You don't want to.
True. So yeah, you don't want to have those kind of credentials stored in such a way so that it becomes a risk in future. So impersonation is the way to go. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, what is a runbook?
Runbook is, you can think of as a it's a code, and in this case, it's an editor in which you can put your code, whether it's a Python or a PowerShell, and you're able to execute it in cloud itself as if it's on your local machine. You're able to execute the code in cloud.
Well, it's just a script, or is it, what am I missing here? Is it just a regular script?
Yeah, it's it's where they're storing the scripts in the Azure Automation account. They store them in runbooks, so you can have an account with a lot of different runbooks that do different tasks.
Okay, I got it.
It's just a script. Yeah,
It's just a script.
just a script. Yeah. Are you going to demo it, Nitin? Yeah, you'll see. Good question, though. Because any question, honestly, is a good question.
So it's a demo time. So what we are going to do is I have two small demos, both varieties. One is hybrid connection. This is the more latest one. And then hybrid worker. And what we're trying to do is the same thing, which is trying to create a AD group on a virtual machine acting as the on-prem AD. And here I'm leveraging Azure Logic App. That will be actually triggering my Azure Automation. I have a runbook over there. And how I'm not going to call my Azure Logic App directly. I'm actually going to use something what we call in identity governance, something access package. So I'm going to have a user assign an access package. And then as soon as the access package is requested and it's approved by the user, administrator, then it will gonna trigger my Logic app, which is in turn trigger my Azure Automation runbook in Azure Automation account, and then which is going to execute and create a AD group. Let's see. Change the presentation to the machine. So over here, we have.
That's not, you're not sharing on Teams, I don't. Oh, yeah, yeah, you are.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're good. It took a second.
I have a virtual machine called BHT Azure AD. Is acting as a on-prem server. So this is going to act like the on-prem AD server. As you can see, I have created a bunch of AD groups in there, and I built a connection manager, which tells me the two connections I have with my VM in Azure. With the VM and in Azure, I have it, both of them are connected.
Make that a little larger,
Oh, sure.
do Control Plus or something.
Better?
Oh, much better.
Okay. And this one is just to make it more interesting. I'm orchestrating and controlling through an index database in cloud so that I'm using a SQL Server in cloud, Azure SQL Server. And I'm going to provide the information about whatever the access group I'm trying to work with, whatever the AD group I'm trying to add. And so all this information over here. And
This is like logging, Nitin? What's the business purpose of it?
the idea is to you need to have a central location as an index database to keep a control over what you're doing, because some of these services have no idea. Because when you trigger an access package, it has no idea what AD group you're going to create. And so in that way, or down the road, if you want to assign certain roles, system has no idea. The processes are independent in each other. So we have a index database to tie everything.
It's a state store.
So in this case, what I'm going to do, I'm going to edit.
New feature. You didn't used to be able to edit in the portal like that. That's cool.
Well, it depends on who you are, probably.
Yeah. Didn't used to do that.
Preview mode.
I just created PhD group, group 5. Change over here. It's the second one, third one. In this case, first we're going to visit hybrid connections. So I created a Azure function app.
It's a function app.
So function app is just similar to Lambda app in AWS, where you are able to run logic on demand.
AWS, you mean in Azure? It's similar to Lambda functions.
Lambda function in AWS, so you're able to run, and here in this case, you're able to code and actually publish the code in cloud, and you're able to run. So you can think of as a anything logic for your custom software, you're actually running as
It's
functions.
event-driven scripting, right?
Yes.
Or actually code.
It's a
So,
code, actually.
yeah, well, it can be script. You can actually run PowerShell, which is actually exactly the same as Azure Automation. In fact, Azure Automation came first, and then functions came along. They support PowerShell, but also the code. So you write it in C#, Python. So if you're a developer, functions. But if you're not a developer, you can still use functions. So to some extent, there's actually a little bit of an overlap between Azure Automation and functions.
Right. In the first case, what I'm doing is I've designed a PowerShell function. And
We've written in PowerShell, excellent.
yeah, so it's a PowerShell function, and as you can see over here, first let me show you the hybrid worker. So you have networking. And as you can see, I have hybrid connections.
What's that?
This is the hybrid connection, like you can create, and I showed you a little while back on the VM. You have to install. So basically, first thing, as you mentioned, Adam, like you have to set up the firewall, right? Firewall group. So that you have a secure connection, then you have to configure the hybrid connection with it, install the agent, you download it, install on the VM. And then once you have configured it, you can connect it. And the way to connect, as you can see, is over here. Find the hybrid connection, you provide the link, and you're able to connect it to the VM.
A way for functions to talk to on-prem services without using ExpressRoute or site-to-site VPN.
So in this case, I have this hybrid connection over here. And coming back to the function app, here's my code. Here's my code. And in this case, as reading the name, but you asked about the credential. Here in this case, I'm passing the credentials saved in the parameter in the Azure function, but I can also have it as a run as and on the Azure hybrid worker. So here in this case, what I'm doing, very simplistic example where I can just
It's just like a runbook.
just like a run. And if I run it,
The password should be in a keyboard,
Yeah.
not in the environment.
for this one, yes, ideally it should be in keyboard to be more secure. In this case, I have a parameter in the Azure function.
You pass a parameter on the, okay. Well, that's encrypted if you're using HTTPS, so that's okay. You're debugging your function.
There you go. Go to success. Oh, there you go. Okay, okay.
You configured this one as a webhook.
I can create a new one.
Was the error? I can't read.
Yeah, the group exists.
Oh, okay, you need to.
So fresh.
So this is a webhook, so it stands up on HTTPS. You call from anything, and you're debugging it.
Giving an error, what's telling me?
So your PowerShell is calling your VM on-prem, Nitin?
Right. Let's see. The ADG5, ADG6, these are the two ones I've created. So I ran the Azure script in the Azure function, and it was able to create the AD groups on a VM acting as an on-prem AD. That's one way to do it.
Can everyone follow? Does that make sense to everybody? It went through that super quick. But
I blinked, I kind of missed some of it.
repeat the question again.
Well, I noticed that it said that the 80 group was already exists. So did you
Right.
run it twice or something, or what happened?
Yeah, probably I ran twice.
Okay.
That's what happened. That's why I complained that the AD group is already there, so.
So this VM is an 80 controller is essentially right. Okay.
I guess the sort of the magic that Nitin's highlighting here is that he's making changes to it from Azure. And even though it's running on-prem, I mean, making a change to a VM isn't a big deal. Anyone can do that with the right privileges if you can see it, right? I guess the point that we're calling out here is that you can't see it is what, because it's on-prem. But the function can, via that hybrid connection magic, without using ExpressRoute or site-to-site VPN, nothing fancy. It can make whatever scripting changes he has permissions or gives that function permissions to do so, whatever he wants. And then he can call that function. He was demonstrating calling it manually. He was manually testing it, but you can automate that. And that's the power. That's the power.
That's my next demo is I'm automating that part instead of.
Beautiful. That's a nice segue. It's like almost we planned that. Go for it.
So you could actually change the Active Directories throughout the system, even on the VMs from, from using this.
Can do a lot. I mean, like right now, I don't have the ability to actually add a user to that AD group. Basically, the example which I'm going to show next.
Why don't you run as somebody that can?
That would solve the problem. Yeah.
So basically, what we are trying to do is you can think of as a self-service. People can request, employees can request that they need certain functionalities. They request it. You're taking the IT out of the picture. The whole process of automation and assignment of the resource for whatever the time is completely automated in the backend. And we are orchestrating everything from the cloud.
See, this is technically a good thing. Process-wise and checks and balances point of view, what are your safeguards here? You know, I'm a rogue employee, or even worse, I'm an ignorant employee. And I like to mess with things without thinking too much.
Right.
How would you prevent me from inadvertently or knowingly sabotage your solution?
Great question. So what we are doing over here is that the only link I'm going to provide, the only interface I provide to the user is that URL from that access package. And all that URL says that requested access or not. I mean, like all you can do is request or not. So assign yourself or unassign yourself. Otherwise, you don't actually see Azure anywhere. When as a user you are requesting, you don't see Azure, you have no interaction with Azure. All you're requesting it and everything is running in the backend. And in fact, this is why they don't get to see the Logic app, which is running the show. They never see the Azure Automation or the hybrid worker. They don't see anything. In fact, when developers are developing it, they don't even need to know the admin password. And run it as a run as kind of a configuration. Somebody can do it one time and that's about it. This is all they have to do. So you are right. We cannot. So in this particular case, it's completely opaque, black box for the end user. All they are doing is, okay, I need access to these. Let's say I need access to 3 different applications. I go there. This is the access package for this application. I assign myself.
So you have stuff in Logic apps then,
Yes.
which is safeguarding, crazy thing, or preventing.
Exactly. I even have an approval process.
You should have one.
Just because they have requested access, assigned themselves, they're not going to get it until their manager approves it.
Correct.
That's the approval process. I can have multiple steps or stages there. And then the show runs over here. So of course, we have checks and balances. You cannot have this kind of mechanism, and you cannot have this kind of privileges given directly to the end users. We try to make things easier for them, make it self-service. Just like how I was saying that this is the new trend, try to give the power to the user, take out the IT, try to make it much more transparent and fast. So shortly, you will see the example. So that was for hybrid connection. Now, when you have, one thing I learned is when you're dealing with the LDAP-based devices, machines, you need to have hybrid work. So now we'll be looking at hybrid work, how it will work out. So in this case, I have a test user and Azure Active Directory. I have something called identity governance, entitled management. How many of you are familiar with entitled management in the Active Directory? So that's one way to manage.
What is that, Nitin? I've never heard of it.
So basically, entitled management is how we are able to provide access to a variety of resources in a user-friendly manner so that users are able to access it and we are able to assign the policies and procedures as well as automation behind it. And I have a sample access package. It comprises of a catalog, and we have something called access package link. And the users are actually only going to get this link. So this particular part, let me define. It has a policy that we can enforce. And this policy, as you can see, this says for users in your directory. I have several options to choose depending on the policy. Request information I can have, life cycle wise. I'm providing some timelines. It requires access reviews, custom extensions here. Whenever the request is approved, then this is a logic app actually I have, which triggers whenever somebody actually approves the access request. And let's go to the logic app.
It's a logic app.
Logic app is a visual approach to programming. You can think of as a building blocks you can connect and try to implement a logic, but here it's more like a visual. And you can think of it as a workflow on steroids. You are able to do a lot more, from integration to variety of Azure resources to third-party solutions to calling Azure Automation runbooks to posting your data to Twitter, grabbing the data from Salesforce. You can do a lot. And also, like with the Logic app, you can actually we also connect to data from on-prem using the data gateway.
If functions are low code, this is no code.
No code.
It's similar to Power Automate too.
It's the same engine as Power Automate. Yes. Yeah, this is more designed for IT use. So it's, as Nitin is demonstrating, automating IT processes. You would, in order to enable business users, Power Automate is for business users. It's the same engine.
In this case, as you can see, this is Logic app. Again, all the logic you can see in a visual manner. And this particular Logic app is just sitting and waiting for approval to be granted. So as soon as, so we have a HTTP, waits for HTTP request to be there, then it grabs which user has requested it, matches with the catalog, and then remember we have updated our database with the name of the AD group that we want to create, grabs the information from there, and these if it has been approved, and if yes, it is approved, then it calls my automation runbook, passes the parameter like principal name and AD group name, and then it tells me what's the output, was it successful or not.
Did everyone follow that? That was kind of quick. Did everyone follow that? I only just followed that.
All right. So I'm going to go through the whole thing and come back and tell you how it is. I'm just showing the various parts of moving parts of the solution of the demo.
So what does that get user? Was that an Azure AD connector, that second one? It is, right? Get user is an Azure AD connection.
Yeah. So basically, the whole idea is whenever the user approves the access package, this particular logic app gets triggered because I'm naming this logic app to be started whenever the access package gets approved in the policy section of the access package. And It grabs the information from the database that's acting as an index database for me so that I get the information about the AD group. Otherwise, how my logic app would know which group to create. So it gets the AD group and then it calls, then it checks whether this is approved request, and then it calls the automation runbook. That's the key part. My logic app is able to call the automation runbook, and then it executes it using the hybrid worker on the local Active Directory machine, and it's able to tell me that this is the result of the, because you need to know whether it's successful or not, right? And you can actually take it further by actually grabbing the information about get the GUID of the AD group that was created, update the index database with that, so that in future wise, it knows what's happening. So our index group, index database is more like for orchestrating and trying to have a control. Otherwise, these services won't know what they are going to work with. Also, most important, you don't want to create a AD group which is already there. So how you control it, that's, you can extend it further. So let me show you the next one, next component. The last one is your Azure Automation account. So here's my automation account. Here are my runbooks. In this case, I'm using one particular runbook called Azure AD Group Creation. And if you want to see, I have this code in the run. So basically this code, PowerShell code, all it does is it checks if the AD group exists, and it doesn't create the AD group. But in this case, like the code also tries to add the member, but I don't have the AD connect sync going on, so I can't actually show it. But you can actually add a user, whoever has triggered it, or requested a access package, add it to the group. And then you can later down the road, you can assign permissions to the AD group, and then you can have a nice way so that somebody requests certain functionalities or applications, they get the permissions. They're going to IT and specifically them creating the AD group and assigning the permissions manually.
This PowerShell runs against your VM on-prem.
That's right. And over here, we have something called, let me close this. Here. Workers, hybrid worker groups. This is my hybrid worker, which is actually running on-prem, and it is the one which is going to execute this. Now, trying to tie everything in, now I'm going back, trying to show everything from start, how an end user experience would look like, okay? And then depending on your interest, I can go and go deeper into every section that I've talked about. Coming back over here, let me try to grab my access package ID. This is my access package. And as I was mentioning, this is the only thing my user sees. So test to user is a regular user, okay? And I have provided this user this URL to the access package. And this is the access package. Right now, I have already granted access. So let me remove it, and then it will request again. Now I can make this much more interesting by whenever the action of remove is there, I can have another set of logic app execute, or the same one with a little bit change in the logic. I have a switch command over there so that I can have a separate set of PowerShell run, which may remove this user from the AD group. You can do that. So fresh. So we do not have any access package. I request access. Here, this is the access package I'm using. I'm interested in. All I say is that I am interested in access so applications. That's about it. That's the only interaction the end user is going to have. They just requested access. And I have a separate account. I approve. Who has requested access, waiting for my approval. The moment I approve,
So nothing yet has been triggered any of your automation.
nothing. This is the approval stage. This is the checks and balances. So now if you see,
Running.
my logic app is running. It got triggered. Okay, I'm ready to go. Grabs the request, gets this access package. If you see the assignment or the access package, initial policy, catalog name, assignment request approved. Test user 2 is the one which requested it. So I'm getting the name of the user who requested it with it. And then I grab information about the user and I grab from my index database name of the AD group that I'm trying to add. I have a switch statement, which basically has assignment request approved section. So it doesn't go unless until it's actually approved.
So wait a bit, pulls from the database. What put it in the database?
Database, what we put is the name of the AD group. Otherwise, how the system will know which AD group to create.
So that's static content.
That's
that
the
lives
static
in there.
content in the database.
Okay.
And actually, good question you have asked, because you can actually write a logic app to actually populate the Azure database. You can have it as a function. You just pass the values, it will update the database as well. So
You could also have a logic app to actually ask a human. So you could actually have a logic app that sends an email to a human via Office 365. It's a connector in logic apps. And the logic app, you can have it wait. You know, have the human reply to the email, send it back, and the logic app can then poll an inbox and then handle the human response in the email and carry on. So you can get quite clever with it if you want.
you can do a lot, very interesting ways to collect the information, because you're right. I mean, like, who wants to go there and query data and add the table like that? So best way is actually create a function to do that. So
A ton of this is situation, context, skills dependent. I want to point that out. and that it's not necessarily mutually exclusive, meaning you say, okay, this is function apps, this is logic apps. Well, not quite so. You could call Azure Functions from logic apps and vice versa.
Yes.
And it depends. So we did a project recently, I cannot give you the client's name. But the idea was we did two parallel things. One using logic apps as a driver and calling stateless functions from that. The other one was all functions using durable functions, which are stateful functions and stateless functions correspondingly, because we wanted to show client this is programmatic approach, and this is a hybrid approach. You're still in Azure, but you can mix and match, and you can slice and dice it several different ways here. And there is no absolute the right or wrong thing here. It context, skills, preferences play a huge role in this.
Also, what you can do is that you can call a logic app from a logic app. So when I created the logic app to update this database, I was calling it from a logic app to test out the passing the parameters, but then I can call this logic app from a code as well or Azure function as well. Nothing is stopping us. So there's no right or wrong way. You have to see which one is the most optimized one, because you have to remember every time a function runs or every time a logic calculation is done, you're paying for it.
Actually, we timed all this in the setting of the application, and logic apps did pretty well, which surprised a lot of people.
In terms of the performance of them?
Yes, because logic apps has been around much longer than durable functions. And therefore, it has been tweaked to a much better performance than durable functions. So again, the maturity of software solution plays big time.
Now logic apps have a new tier, a standard tier,
Yes.
so they can be even faster if you want, also relatively new. Yep, even more options.
More options. So in our case, like now here is the case, we are actually calling our automation runbook. And as you can see, I'm passing the parameters, the name of the AD group and name of the user over here. And I'm getting the output from it. So here's the output. Always the raw output. And if you see automation, this is the runbook, which was executed on 11. From the output, this is the input given. Output AD group exists is false. Basically, it's just confirming that this is a new AD group, which was not existing before. You see over here. PhD new group 5. That's the one which I sent.
It's very good, Nitin. We have a very similar parallel process within Microsoft where users can request SharePoint site accesses. So it's pretty similar to this.
So yeah, so here you see like I was able to trigger it from a access package. User assigned the access package, we got it approved. User doesn't see anything after that. The logic app gets triggered. It calls a automation runbook, which in turns executes, the hybrid worker executes the runbook on a 80 on the on-prem machine, and then it adds the 80 group over there. Now, one thing that code has it, but I don't have the functionality over here, is add a user, whoever's requested it, to that 80 group. So you can, this is just one example that the power of hybrid automation and the possibilities, this is how I call it, the possibilities are immense. How you design it, how you implement it, how you orchestrate it, how you manage it, that's the key. Make sure we do it in a much simpler manner so that we don't have any, like, number one, security issues or loopholes. Also, I just showed a part of the solution that I have built deliberately, but the entire thing, like, or like automation of complete identity governance of an organization, everything running through the cloud.
A question, if the organization wanted to use a ServiceNow instead of the identity governance feature, what would you change?
ServiceNow, I mean, like, the only part, if they, let's say they want to use ServiceNow, yeah, I mean, like,
Create a ServiceNow ticket.
right, so I need to have a logic app just listening to the action.
Yeah.
Just like how I have my logic app, just waiting for the action. And as soon as it has the required built-in safe checks, like it's approved or not or whatever, then you can do it. In fact, like I have done, I think early last year, the integration, a bi-directional integration with Microsoft Sentinel, with ServiceNow. So actually, like every time a ticket is created or incident is created, a similar incident is raised in ServiceNow. And if in ServiceNow, you have to create a custom field. So if they close the incident, it actually comes and closes the incident in
Logic app.
Microsoft Sentinel. Logic app. That's all I did using the Logic app.
Sentinel creates, it spots something a bit ropey, and via that automation, a ServiceNow ticket is created so a human can action it. Is that?
In fact, I do have that Logic app over here.
See it?
Yes. Let's see.
You have to call the Logic app. It's not sitting there listening for things to happen.
No. For Logic app, like the one which I have, which I'm using, is based on an action. It's waiting for something to happen, and then when something happens, it gets acted. Okay. And the same thing on the ServiceNow, it's waiting for you to close the ticket, then sees the ticket is closed, and then, but again, it's not magic. You have to have a custom field. Otherwise, ServiceNow would have no idea what is the ID of this incident in Microsoft Sentinel. You always need to have that value. Otherwise, how it's going to know? Let me show you. I did it for two systems, one for Fresh Service and Sentinel. Both ways, actually, like ServiceNow actually has a app, so that was nice. Show you.
To build on Ray's question, so yes, Logic apps can listen to all kinds of things. They can listen to emails, webhooks. There's all kinds of stuff, or they can wake up periodically. You know, they can check databases if you want. They can poll the database, like Nitin's database. They can poll that and look for changes if you want. There's all kinds of wait for messages, just message queues, event grid. They can be triggered by a whole array of things.
So now we can have SQL Server triggering functions, Azure functions, based on data. Update operations, inserts, updates, deletes, can directly fire. This is SQL 2022, which was just introduced in GA a couple of weeks ago in the past. So that is something, you know, that's turning the whole thing on its head. You could have things driven from Azure to on-prem or vice versa, whichever way you want to do.
Right. In this case, ServiceNow does have an app over here. So actually like it's much more easier to create a ticket in ServiceNow. But I have something called fresh service over here. Now, in this case, they don't have an app. All they have is a RESTful API. But you are still able to use it, leverage it through Logic App to actually create an incident in a separate incident management solution using purely RESTful API. Just like how earlier you used to write a code or even an Azure function, here you can just run the whole thing using the Azure Logic App. And vice versa, same thing. If somebody closes in a fresh service, they would be able to close in Sentinel. And you have a Logic App. Again, you can create it. Here it's just waiting for something to be triggered. And I think you have the second one as well. The Snow to Sentinel I was looking for. This is interesting. Here in this case, still waiting for something to happen. And then once it happens, it actually grabs you need to provide the Microsoft incident ID, Microsoft Sentinel, and then it's able to identify and close the ticket. Because that's the big problem. People, they have the ticket created, service now, but they don't go back and close the ticket in Microsoft
So this
Sentinel.
is your listener, right?
Yeah.
Is listening, constantly calling, saying, do you have something for me? Am I being asked to do something? Right?
So you configure ServiceNow to call this your Logic App, right?
Whenever you close the ticket in ServiceNow or take action, this will be called.
But this is how you create microservices, right?
Very powerful. I love Logic App and the capacity and the kind of functionality it provides, and all low code or no code, actually no code literally.
The reason you needed the workbooks was to run the PowerShell on the VM. If you had a connector of some kind that did that work for you for Logic Apps, you could in theory have done it that way from the Logic App and not needed the Azure Automation.
Right. So it's just an orchestration mechanism you can think of.
So we went to Google BigQuery and connected using Logic App connector to BigQuery to pull data from that on demand. Use Logic Apps as orchestrator for that. Increasingly, we are running into multi-cloud scenarios, and that's where Logic App shines. Like the connectors, as Adam was mentioning, these are pre-built program logic, if you will, which you don't have to write, quite reusable, battle tested. You just call them. So from that point of view, Logic App becomes enterprise application integrator here and is quite powerful.
Plus, if you are using Azure Functions, then you have to host the code somewhere on the Azure DevOps and then have the whole pipeline built and manage the code and the whole thing which goes with it. So that's your second option. So compared to that, this is better. So that's about it. This is any questions for me? Or anything you would like me to go back more in detail that you might have anything? Yes, sir.
Yeah, one of the scenarios you mentioned earlier was that build and deploy is one thing you could use this for, but why would you use that over Azure DevOps?
Build and deploy using Logic Apps versus Azure DevOps, you say?
I'm sorry, no, automation.
Automation. Frankly, I would, personally speaking, I'm a big fan of Terraform. I use Terraform for my resource provisioning and makes things much more easier. I've used biceps and blueprints in past. and they have strength and weakness as well. But overall, like I would like to keep what's the right word? Familiar. I want to have that stability in that aspect. So this is why the different organizations use different tools. Everybody has their own preference. But here in my case, I use Terraform with DevOps.
So you're talking in terms of infrastructure, not necessarily code, but not necessarily software.
Not necessarily software. Here, I'm just talking about automation. Software in the sense you're trying to talk about automating certain management activities. And also it could be related to resource tracking, resource management, resource utilization. So it could be anything. And the main part is how you design it, and you design it in a way so that it's manageable. And also like it gives you the output that you are looking for with the shortest cost, with
So when
lowest cost.
your focus is deployment automation, that's when DevOps becomes a more useful choice. When your focus is on process automation, as you're doing here, then this is a preferable alternative.
What about creating tenants? If you have say you have a client that has a subscription in Azure, and this client wants to have some solution that's tenanted, is this really a good scenario? I mean, is that a good scenario for automation, would you
So you're
say?
talking about B2C tenants?
Yeah.
My tenant. Give me my tenant.
Okay, so it could be, customer has a solution. Something I was actually looking into recently.
Yeah.
Customer has a solution where they want their customers to have a web app, some kind of backend in Azure, and a mobile app as well. And these, we constructed, well, actually, we're solutioning an MVP for this, and it's only going to be one tenant, but they want to be able to sell it to multiple customers.
And
it
it
seems
seems
like-
like a multi-tenant solution, so they want that pattern for each customer. Bang, 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 bang.
Yes, exactly.
I think there's nothing you can automate as tenant.
Unless until you're looking for B2C, creating B2C tenant provisioning, and then deploying it through that, that's one way. Otherwise, like you're looking at, if it's a single tenant, then you're looking at how you're gonna have multiple users have access to it, and then have to make sure it's more about the cost perspective.
Well, each one of these, now, I don't know if I'm using the word tenant here correctly. Does Azure see it as separate tenants? Maybe not.
Let me give you an example, like I had.
You're talking about onboarding
Single
multiple
subscription.
tenants, right? Not just one, but say you have a SaaS solution. And you're saying, how can I onboard multiple customers?
Right.
And each customer has a tenant, right?
Each customer will have his own Azure
That's where
directory,
DevOps is a preferable solution.
Active Directory, sorry.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
but you don't want to create tenants willy-nilly in Azure Directory. I mean, that is the ultimate. You have a tenant established and that lives for the longest time. So that automation I'll shy away from, even if that can be done.
Okay.
I won't go there. It's just my personal preference. I will sit there, see, do you want a new tenant? Do you want a new tenant? Because tenants are pretty powerful in Active Directory. They are the ultimate owners.
Customers need access to the tenant.
So,
Yeah, tenant in Azure is a very
It's
powerful.
a very, see, the thing is that I think the right place to look at is, there are two ways. One is B2B, Azure AD B2B. So you are able to invite other organizations, provided they have the Office 365 license, that they can use the same user and password to access your tenant. Second part, B2C, you can have, so that you can have the whole integration of, like, you want to sign in through Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, B2B, so you can have different sort of, different type of sign-in experiences for different type of users, depending on your customers, whether they are partners or regular business customers, and then you can define your solution around it, but you don't create tenants like that.
Tenant being an Azure AD.
Maybe subscriptions.
Yeah.
No, the way I've seen that kind of thing done before is you define the infrastructure as code that represents whatever the resource is for each tenant. In this case, it's not an Azure AD tenant, it's whatever the customer defines as tenant, their definition of tenant. For Azure, it's just a bunch of resources. Define the infrastructure as code, give me a second, and then choose a mechanism for deploying that infrastructure as code, which could be a logic app, could be DevOps, like he's suggesting. You have a few options there, and that infrastructure might include, and usually would, an identity solution, and that's what Nitin was describing. B2C is a discrete identity solution that is particularly targeted at managing identities on the behalf of, bringing identities from elsewhere for SaaS solutions. That's the commonest use case. It's not it is sort of a sub set of features of a full-blown Azure AD. So you've got a few ways of deploying that infrastructure as code. Could do it with a logic app. You could initiate it with a logic app.
Why not just use Active Directory and give each of your tenants a directory and put whatever they need there and give them the permissions to use it?
No, don't do that.
Don't do that.
Don't do that. No,
Don't
use B2C to do that. That's a much, Azure AD is a corporate identity solution. And it is designed to hold, and there's only one Ray, right? There's only one Ray, and Ray has an identity in Ray's Azure AD. What you're suggesting is, well, actually, I'm create an Adam identity, and then there's a third Ray. So each of those Azure ADs is an identity provider, right? And so they create and manage a set of identities. So there should only be one. There's only one Ray. It should only be in your Azure AD. But what the use case that he was describing is, I'm a SaaS provider. I'm selling you something. I'm selling you some software, and I want Ray's identity to be used to access my SaaS software. The easiest way to do that is using a service called Azure B2C, which allows you to bring the identity of your choice or the one I let, which it doesn't have to be Azure AD. It could be your Google or Yahoo ID, whatever we want you to use, but it's still you, it's Ray, right? And that is not an Azure AD tenant. It's not necessarily, a Ray over here. The Ray's still there. We're just bringing it into this little subset of service, and then we can manage it and manage the billing and all those kinds of things.
But with them, they're going to have access to whatever service they provide.
Yes.
But they're going to have their own data associated with that
They are.
in wherever that thing is.
Yep, indeed. So those are a separate deployment of Azure resources. That's different from the identity used to access them. Two different things. So we'd want our own set of database servers or web apps or SQL database or whatever it is that they're using. That doesn't really matter. Just one of those per customer, Ray's company. With a set of resources just for you, identity provider just for you, and a bunch of infrastructure as code to define that, and then bang it out. One for you, one for me, one for him, and just keep banging those out.
Also, on top of it, what you have nowadays is you can have multiple, because companies have multiple Azure tenants, right? So now you have something called connected organizations. So you are able to actually connect with the other AD. And in a way, again, there the entitled management comes in picture for automation aspects, so that how you're going to grant the users from this tenant access into the other tenant without actually uploading through a CSV through Azure AD B2B or having a partial using Azure AD B2B API. So a lot more things are happening. So I think this was still in preview. Last time I checked connected organizations.
Customers don't want multiple Azure ADs. That's only if they have typically acquisitions.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
they don't want that. They want one. You want
Exactly.
one. So if you have them more than one, that's bad.
So question is it uncommon to use, let's say I have a web application and I want to keep internal users of that web application, like login with the password and all those, right? So you don't want to create that login identity in your database or all those stuff.
Don't do that. Nope.
And so is it uncommon to create a just tenant and Azure Active Directory just for that application?
Yeah, it is. That's
It's
right.
uncommon.
Yeah, don't do that because you're overdoing. That's exactly what Ray just suggested. Exactly what Ray just suggested. So the approach that you should do is use B2C. That is a small subset. It's identity providers specifically designed to bring identities to it. So you would stand up your web app. You don't want, and you don't want Ray to, you don't have to create a set of identities to have Ray create yet another credential, right? You don't have to have, because what you described is a separate Azure AD tenant. Ray would have to create another ID in that. He'd have to create a username and password. He'd get another email in that. No one wants that. Instead, that's hassle. What would be better is if Ray picked his Google account. I just bring my Google account, sign in with Google, or sign in with a Microsoft account, or sign in with Yahoo or LinkedIn or one of those. He wants to just, because he's already got one of those, and he gets to pick, and you allow him which one he gets to have. And then you let Ray bring that identity to your web app, and then that is his identity on your service, and you use that for all the authentication and personalization and billing and whatever it is you do, instead of a separate AD.
Yeah, for login, it is okay, but then if you have some more things in with your application that needs groups, that needs Azure AD, like various things that, like.
You can
roles.
create groups. You can have,
In B2C, yeah, it's a subset of Azure AD.
Yeah.
You can do that. It has those features.
the thing which confuses a lot of people is the term identity or, the definition of identity management at the tenant level is a very powerful concept in Azure Active Directory. And tenants is something where you really have to think hard. Do I really want to create another tenant here? Because that thing ends up owning everything.
The answer is no. No, you don't want another AD tenant.
Yes.
No, you don't.
And if you're interested in this, and this is something which I wanted to mention for the longest time, I started in Azure approximately 4 years ago. I still remember. I came to the first user group meeting. I was sitting right up there. And, Adam greeted me as he always does, everyone else here, and encouraged me to do the Azure certifications. Because, I was a starter in Azure. I had some cloud experience, Heroku Cloud, that sort of thing, web development. And so that was my start. And I remember Jason Anderson did a fantastic presentation on storage management. And I was sitting up there and asking him, is it like Dropbox? And he started laughing in a very good natured way. And he said, no, Bharat, it's just slightly more than that. And so these are two really good people, Jason and Adam. And maybe there is something I want to invest my time. And that started me on the journey. I have just about every certificate in Azure world now, in addition to Kubernetes. And the great men inspired me. Thank you. So, and I work for Microsoft along with him now.
Yeah, that's right. You weren't with Microsoft when we first met. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, see, the reason why I was asking.
Yeah.
Was this is the legacy application.
Yeah.
As we have been using ADSI inside.
You've been using what?
Active ADLDS. Active lightweight directory services.
Okay, the lightweight, so, okay, Active Directory lightweight service,
Yeah,
okay.
it's provided by Microsoft.
Yeah, that's, all right,
Or just like IAS, it's a ADSI. Yeah, ADLDS.
okay.
And that, we use that internal for, just for the application, right?
Okay, yep,
And like, it's not connected to any corporate. It's
understand.
Just
It's a
with that
mini
worksheet.
Active Directory,
Correct.
yeah,
Similar to that, we wanted to do in
in Azure, okay,
We created that separate tenant for that to
Okay.
put some
Got
users over there,
Yep.
but not connected to the corporate AD at all.
I understand,
It's kind of
understand.
To give roles and various,
That stuff, okay, so
just for the application.
I understand, Azure B2C is your ADLS equivalent. Not-
B2C,
Yes, Azure Active Directory B2C.
I have to look it up.
Yes,
and see what-
that's, like the solution for the problem that you described, where you just want an application and some identities in it. You want to manage those, some groups, some permissions, some, authorization, some, those kinds of things.
Yeah,
That's what it's for.
yeah. Initially, in our application, we used for the form authentication, but then,
Right.
but
Yeah.
then we had to switch to interactive login, which actually the person logs into their own corp AD account, and then it redirects back into our application, where you are actually suggesting the B2C users.
Yeah.
They could make use of B2C users and connect all their clients.
Well,
and
the
all
reason
this.
is, you see, this is all done for you.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
have done that, we have secured it. And also you can turn on things like multi-factor authentication.
True, very true.
Easily,
Very true.
instead of trying to program that
Access control and all
yourself,
those
which is
things.
suicidal.
Yeah, and if you want the option, for example, of bringing in identities that are company identities.
Yeah.
So my Microsoft account, for example, adamhems@microsoft.com. If you wanted my identity for your application,
Correct.
that's also possible, right?
With the
It stays in the Microsoft Azure AD where it belongs, but it can be used in a B2C tenant for you. And that's the simplest approach.
Yeah.
So I see here a difference between people that are doing this thing so that their own corporate stuff is running in Azure in the cloud, and they're doing all the corporate stuff. And the group of people that are selling something to somebody, and
Yes.
that is available also and available in Azure, and it's two different groups.
That's exactly
Yes.
right. But
Yeah,
one
that-
identity.
So Microsoft is suggesting one person having one identity.
Yep.
Tenant somewhere,
That's
affiliated
right.
to their domain, basically.
So, yeah, you've got a couple of options. You've got a business identity, right? Which is like my Adam has that's my business
Business
identity. Maybe we don't want to use that. Maybe you want to use my Gmail or my Yahoo one. So that's a consumer identity,
Gotcha.
right? And whether, and it's the selling proposition that Ray was describing, you're selling it to me. Maybe if you've sold it to Microsoft as a business to business transaction, then maybe you'll want me to use my, not my B2C. B2C is business to consumer.
Oh, I see.
B2B is, your Yahoo, your Gmail, all
Gotcha.
those kinds of things. It's still selling, right? So I'm coming to you as Adam, the consumer. I'm giving you a subscription or whatever like that. But if it's something that you've sold to Microsoft and, hey, Microsoft, we just bought this thing, Adam, click here and, you've got access to it. I only use my Microsoft account. That's also possible by a feature called B2B. You don't necessarily need the B2C tenant to enable that, although it does that too. But you can do that. What you still don't want to do is create another Azure AD tenant that's something different and make me create another identity in either of those situations, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Identities
actually-
stay where they are, and whether they're consumer ones or business ones, they are used by you. So, if that answers the question. Don't create another AD. The reason you create an Azure AD is because you're creating brand new identities specific to a corporation. It's
Specific to that application.
not necessarily an application. It's corporation.
Corporation, yeah.
It's Adam's awesome company. Adam's Awesome Company and Adam app, adamsawesomecompany.com. I need an Azure AD for that. And I sign up to Office 365 and get all my corporate stuff and things that Ray was talking about, HR and ServiceNow. And I sign in with Adam's Awesome Company. That's my company account. And, but if I'm doing something else, that's the only reason why I create an Azure AD for that. You wouldn't create one for Adam's Awesome Company unless you've got your own company, your company. You would need one for that. We don't create one for an application. Create a B2C for an application and bring identities to it.
Whole idea is like what kind of experience you want to grant to your users while they are trying to sign in and log in into an application. Are you forcing them to create a new username and password that they have to remember just to use it? And honestly, people get turned off right at that.
No one wants to do that anymore, right? We've all got identities we want to use, corporate one or personal ones. So it's about which one of those you want to use for your
That,
makes sense. Single sign-on, exactly.
SSO into your application using their own identity instead of creating a username and password, which is managed by your application. You have to change and update and less secure.
Yeah. Now, as it happens, B2C does support actually creating a username and password.
Mhm.
Don't use that feature.
Yeah.
Let people bring their own accounts. Okay.
So for the B2B, there are two capabilities to manage your external identity. One is the collaboration, the other one is direct connect.
what's the other one?
Direct connect.
Connect.
Right, so it's allow you to have a two-way mutual trust, and the use case of it is like Teams. When you open up and share your team channel, that's a workspace to collaborate with your partners or your service partner or whatever that, but they're not part of your organization. They're still external, they're still guests, but there's mutual trust there to share a workspace that in the team channel.
With a big catch, the user needs to have an Office 365 license.
That's true, yes.
That's the biggest catch. And also, not all services in Office 365 allow for Azure AD B2B,
Yep.
such as Power Platform. That's one example. Power Apps, Power Automation.
Teams is probably a bad example. It's a bad example.
That's
But
a
yeah.
good example. I've never used B2B successfully.
Yes, I have in the past integrated 16,000 users, turned to the integration using Azure AD B2B. This is why like I've been craving for that connected organization for the last 5 years. And I saw that, I was like, thank God, like finally. But it's again associated with entitled management. Let's look at it.
So with B2B, can you share enterprise applications in one tenant?
B2B, see, B2B, all it does is that it creates an identity in your Azure Active Directory. That's it. How you grant it? That's a separate question.
I have one question.
Yeah.
Like, let's say my application has various roles, its own application roles.
Right, yes.
How do you create? So are you suggesting that we create that in our own database or like our?
So no, so the modern way of solving that problem, the traditional way is, yeah, you put them in a database. There didn't used to be another way. Forms authentication, put them in a database. Modern way is just a feature of modern authentication, and there's a feature of that called claims. It's a modern of OAuth. Yeah, so features of OAuth include a capability called claims, and you can and should configure your application to expect and look for certain claims on the user's identity, and then your application and the identity provider is what controls all of that, what the claims are. They're all configured on the identity provider. Your application's job is to look at the claims once the user signed in, whoever it is, and then decide based upon what claims they have, how the application behaves.
Yeah, the problem is there are like 1,000 roles.
Well, so one claim would be, for example, role, and you have a bunch of different values for that claim.
Oh, is it right? Okay, one claim and under.
Yeah, claim, it's like a key value pair.
So you had a question?
I need to look it
Yeah,
up.
yes.
So you can create claims like that on Azure AD.
It's featured, yeah. Look into the technology of claims. Yes, that's the modern approach.
Is
Good
there-
question.
Hey, Adam.
Yes.
One question, and this borders along the lines of the questions we're not supposed to ask.
Uh-oh,
Yeah.
what does it cost?
In this area. No, it's not, what it is, believe it or not. But, oh, by the way, great outfit. You win the.
Thank you, sir. I actually won a competition. Well, I came second in the Houston office ugly sweater competition today. So that was a pretty big
Watch
deal.
for a retraction. They were wrong.
So I was pretty chuffed with that. So
Anyway.
thank you, thank you.
We all compete in the marketplace. And I was wondering, like, what are the top two things about Azure Automation that, you know, since we're all connected to people and they're going to say, what did you do last night? Well, I went to this Azure Automation thing. Well, what did you think? It's pretty good, but you want to be able to say, what's the aha thing that comes out of it that you think is most important to you? Am I allowed to ask that? Well, I asked it. Is that okay?
That's a great question. I don't know why you not asked it.
Well, it's almost, it has a little sales tinge to it.
It's the elevator speech you're looking for.
Yeah, fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
What is
But I'm the
it?
customer, so I'm looking to hear what you think.
No code, easy to execute.
No,
I don't need days to implement something. I just need hours or minutes.
I totally agree with you. Past 2 weeks, I've been trying to do all of those, like create resources and configure this, every damn thing, right? Like it's for various things what we use. Provisioning.
The main thing is like,
It takes a hell lot of time.
you have to run the process somewhere. And I'm glad I don't have a VM to run this process anyway, it's in cloud. And that's the biggest win I take from here, that just think about for a moment. I mean, like implementing a bi-directional integration with ServiceNow with less than a day of effort, that's magical. I mean, like when I created, I remember when I was doing a migration and my customer pulled up a rabbit out of a hat saying that, hey, here's my custom .NET code and I don't have the source code, but I need to have this application in cloud. What to do? At that moment, this Power Platform came to my help, Power Apps, and I was able to pull that functionality in less than 3 hours. I had the same functionality, it was a dosage calculator, up and running in cloud, same formulas. Thank goodness they had some formulas, but no source code. So I was able to pull it up within 3 to 4 hours. That's powerful. I don't have to have a big team working on it, days in development, testing and everything. So that's the power of automation. And in this case, Power Automate is kind of a brother of Azure Logic Apps in many ways. So I can do a lot with less code. Anybody can do it. That's the part. Anybody can do it, not just me, as long as you understand the flow that you want to have. And not only you can do it, but also when it runs, you can see how it's working. So debugging is not, I've done debugging on SharePoint workflows in past. It was a nightmare. And this is way, way powerful that you are able to visually see how it works. And like I said, sky's the limit. I can post this result to Twitter as well. Nothing stops me, right? And I can call, everything is using RESTful API. And I can use RESTful API to call everything. So I don't need a connector as well. As long as RESTful API is there, I can do anything I want.
And with no code, you may be able to better explain it to the people who are going to make the decisions. And pay the bill.
Exactly. And it keeps things clear. So I like it visual. I'm a visual guy, so I like the visual representation of this. And plus the speed at which I'm able to achieve. And most of the connectors are available, and I don't have to like struggle for it. Call a runbook from Azure Logic App. I have a connector for that. I don't have to create a brand new one. Of course, for fresh service, they didn't have a connector, but at least they had RESTful API. I can still call it. And so sky's the limit. So it just opens the imagination. And then it just helps you trying to go for doing something great at your job, so.
So what do you do? So for the very advanced configuration, like you have to install a lot of certificates and all those that you can do very easily with the Terraform.
Pardon me, can you please
The
repeat?
certificates,
Uh,
a lot of advanced stuff easily with the Terraform.
see, when it comes for certificates, I'll give one example. So you have to see which service to use when. Okay, so in one case where I have to have an integration with a financial organization,
Yeah.
there I did not use the Azure Logic app. I just used it to call the Azure function, but the whole certificate and generating the JWT token and everything, it was in Azure function. So you have to determine where you have security requirements are there I use Azure function. So you have to see it's a case by case. So you cannot, it's not a silver bullet for everything.
So function creating that certificate and installing and various.
So in this case, it was a certificate I was using for authentication with
Gotcha.
with a third party Fortune 500 financial institution to generate a JWT token. So this is what I was doing. In that case, I was using Azure function deliberately because I want to have more control. So it's all about control. If I want more control, then programmatically, Azure function is your way to go.
There are some other options. So what your use case sounded like you want to create a virtual machine and make it a certain way once it's been created.
Yeah.
Okay, so there are three ways of making a virtual machine the way you want it to be. One is using a service called Image Builder, which automatically builds the image of the VM from scratch, automated, and then the image boots from that image. That's one. Second one is a feature of Azure Automation called desired state configuration. This is where the VM will come up from whatever image. So it's not the image is built and then it comes up. The image is plain, ordinary, whatever, Windows or Linux. Then it comes up and then scripts are run on it, desired state configuration, to make it the way that the script says it should be, certificates, whatever it is. And then Azure Automation will periodically poll it to make sure that it hasn't drifted. Or if you want a fleet of virtual machines all to change, I want a new version of Java on these fleet of 1,000 machines, you can use desired state configuration, update the configuration, and it will then go and make every single one of those virtual machines the way you want it is. And the third way is a feature called Cloud Init, which is only an in-between of the image and the desired state, which is the virtual machine comes up, but it takes basically as part of it being provisioned by Azure, this Cloud Init file, which is provisioned with the VM, and it has a whole set of whatever you want installed automatically on it as it comes up, configured, get certificates, run scripts, whatever you want it to do at the time of first provisioning, and that's just all in one Cloud Init file right next to the virtual machine. And so those are your three options.
But the fast compute resources.
Platform as a service?
Yeah, fast compute resources, not, this is IaaS, right? So
Correct, those are all IaaS, yes.
fast,
For platform as a service, you need to use infrastructure as code, or you can use the scripts. You can build them all in PowerShell if you want.
The script based.
You need a script. Yep, you need a script.
Every little aspect of it.
Every component, and that's actually your best practice. You want your web app to be a certain way. You want it, and there are certain ways you should have it too. It should have HTTPS enabled. It should have firewalls configured. There's a whole set of things that you should have on your whatever resource. Yeah, you should have those as infrastructure as code, and that's how you should deploy that resource every single time. Yeah. And you should have governance to ensure that those resources are only deployed that way. That's using Azure policy to force it, is usually the way. So make sure that no one stands up a web app that isn't the way it should be, the way you want it to be, or the way Microsoft recommended. So if somebody tries to stand up a web app in the Azure portal and they don't follow the best practices, they allow HTTP, for example. That's a no, don't do that. Or they stand up a virtual machine with a public IP directly upon it. No, don't do that. You should ban that by Azure policy, or you should provide your users with a script. This is how you should create this whatever resource, because this follows all the best practices. Use that and put governance to make sure that they only use that.
So if you have a already pass resource created, yeah, are there easy way to script that all out?
You
with some-
can export it as a template, yes, if it's already been created in Azure, but that's, frankly, I don't,
Not that great.
yeah, it's not that great. The way you should do it is honestly just start with a clean one. Just start with, there are examples out there.
Start from scratch.
Start with a screen and do it properly. Yeah, it's work. It is work. It's work. It's a good investment of time. You should do it. There are examples. You don't have to start from scratch. Loads of examples out on GitHub for all services for everyone. You don't have to start with an empty one. And follow best practices and use those. And build out a repository of infrastructure as code for the resources you use in Azure. Update them and make everyone use it.
Okay, gotcha.
So essentially, Microsoft has something what they call cloud adoption framework and landing zone design. So you start from there and using all the best practices, governance, security, monitoring, and then you have the whole, when you are leveraging Azure, try to do it the right way. Otherwise, you'd be looking for security holes.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Do it the right way. There's also a framework called the WAF, the Well Architected Framework, aka.ms/WAF. Yes, the WAF, and it encompasses best practices for each Azure service. Got like monitoring, security, cost management, scalability, and security, and all the guidance best practices. You should follow all of those.
For the scenarios I explained, what is the best scripting language? Like for
That's a good question. So you have choices. Nitin is a Terraform fan, right?
So Terraform works for that.
Terraform absolutely works. That can be your infrastructure as code. If you like that, knock yourself out. The Microsoft one is it was ARM. It's now called Bicep. So if you don't know anything about Terraform and don't want to learn it, don't care, then use Bicep. If you already know Terraform or like it for any reason at all, use Terraform. Neither is the wrong choice. One or the other. Those are the two.
Here's the beauty thing with Terraform, it's cloud agnostic, meaning you can use any platform.
Oh,
Yeah, that's one of the main selling points. Yeah.
Use any other platform. You can use it in the.
Yeah, you can use it.
Don't go for it.
You can use it native, yes, and GCP. Yeah, Bicep is Microsoft, it's Azure.
Oh, I see.
If you plan to stay in Azure, Bicep is superior.
Yeah.
No question.
Yeah, if you're an Azure only shop, then yes, Bicep is.
Okay.
Yeah, it's easier to use. Has native support, it's more up to date.
For an Azure shop, I noticed he was using Google Chrome as his browser instead of Edge.
I always do.
Yes. I wasn't going to say anything. But seeing as you said that, Ray, yeah, how about that? Just messing with you. Hey, he's using a Microsoft hardware laptop right there. Right there, look at that. Microsoft laptop is the one. Just, give us a kudos. All right. Any other questions? Did you get your questions answered, sir?
I know where to look now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah. Infrastructure as code is the pattern that you would want. B2C for an entity provider. Okay.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
All right, well, then we can wrap it up. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'll wrap it up. So that concludes it for this month. Thank you all for coming out. Next month, mid-January, we have a date. I'm going to schedule it. It's Airflow is an open source technology used for data migration, how that works with Azure. We'll have someone come in to talk about that. And then in February, we've got Azure Red Hat OpenShift for any of you container aficionados or those who wish to be. So a very powerful container-based service in Azure in February. So we're going to have Red Hat come in and talk about that. And I've got a speaker planned for the week after, the month after that, so March, but we haven't got a topic yet. So we've got some fun stuff lined up. So I hope to all see you at those. Thank you for coming out. Please take some pizza, and I hope to see you in the new year.
Thank you so much.